Introducing MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts. Get early access to new original podcasts from MSNBC and ad-free listening to all of Rachel Maddow's chart-topping, award-winning original series, including Season 1 and Season 2 of Ultra, Bagman, and Deja News, plus exclusive bonus content and new episodes of The Rachel Maddow Show and Morning Joe ad-free. Subscribe to MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts.
Thanks to you at home for joining us this hour for a special edition of The Rachel Maddow Show, which is my interview with Stormy Daniels. When Ms. Daniels agreed to this interview, it was, I think, in large part because that trial was over. The Republican presumptive nominee for president, former President Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York, centered on the payment that was made to Ms. Daniels to try to stop her from speaking publicly about her experience with Mr. Trump. Ms. Daniels testified in that trial. Mr. Trump was convicted by the jury on all 34 counts with which he was charged. After his conviction, after that trial was over, that is when Ms. Daniels agreed to sit down with me for her first American interview after the conclusion of the trial. But now, it seems the trial maybe is no longer concluded. It is no longer over. Today in New York, Judge Juan Merchan agreed to delay Donald Trump's sentencing in this case. He's facing up to 4 years in prison here. That sentencing will be delayed now so that Judge Merchan can consider a new motion from Trump's defense lawyers. The new motion from them is because of the just astonishing U.S. Supreme Court ruling yesterday, which went further than basically any legal observers had expected in granting Trump immunity from prosecution for anything he did while in office that could loosely be construed as an official act. One of the most radical elements of the Supreme Court's decision, one that was so radical, Justice Amy Coney Barrett wouldn't actually sign on to this part of it. One of the most radical parts of it is that the ruling not only establishes that Trump can't be prosecuted for so-called official acts, it means even if his alleged crimes were committed on his own time as a private matter, prosecutors bringing charges against him for those crimes can't use any evidence in court that relates to any arguably official actions. So in the New York criminal case related to this payment to Stormy Daniels, Trump's lawyers are now going to try to claim, essentially, that some of the crucial evidence that was used to convict him should retroactively be deemed inadmissible on the basis of the fact that he was doing president stuff when he did those things that showed up as evidence in this case. And now with this new Supreme Court ruling, anything that's a president thing can't be cited as evidence, even if it is cited as evidence to support proving a totally unrelated crime that he did as a private citizen. So, long story short, instead of sentencing Donald Trump next week, Thursday next week, which was when it was initially scheduled, Judge Juan Merchan will instead consider the motion from Trump's defense lawyers to throw out the jury's guilty verdict. He will consider Trump's defense lawyers' argument about that. He will also consider arguments against that from the prosecutors. And then on September 6th, he will rule on that motion to throw out the guilty verdict. If he doesn't throw out the verdict, Trump's sentencing will go ahead on September 18th. Rather than next week, it'll be September 18th. So that was all just decided today. And one of the things it means in practical terms is that if the Republican Party's presidential nominee, Donald Trump, is going to be sentenced to prison in this case, that sentence will now be handed down 7 weeks before the election instead of 17 weeks before the election, which is when it was going to happen. They say most Americans don't really start paying attention to the election until after Labor Day. Well, now, if he is going to get a prison sentence, his prison sentence is going to be well after Labor Day instead of months before Labor Day, which had been the original schedule. Ta-da! Since the debate between Trump and President Joe Biden, Democrats have, of course, been newly and acutely focused on questions about President Biden's age. And the question of whether he should stay as the party's nominee, or should he and Vice President Harris have her take over the top of the ticket and pick a new running mate for her. This is an increasingly animated conversation on the Democratic side. Presumably the Democrats realize they need to move forward quickly on this, whatever they're going to do. On the Republican side, though, since the debate, Donald Trump is moving backwards. He is moving backwards to this criminal trial at which he was convicted.
How many billions of dollars do you owe in civil penalties for molesting a woman in public, for doing a whole range of things, of having sex with a porn star on the night while your wife was pregnant? I mean, what are you talking about? You have the morals of an alley cat.
Give you a minute, sir.
I didn't have sex with a porn star.
Not only is Donald Trump's defense team asking effectively to reopen this case and to push any possible sentencing of Trump 10 weeks closer to the election than it otherwise would be, he is also, as of this debate, he is still trying to tell America that Stormy Daniels is lying, that they did not have sex. He does not need, for lack of a better term, he does not need to litigate that point. But he keeps trying to, still, even now, even at that debate. The reason Stormy Daniels testified in detail under oath at his criminal trial about her interaction with him is because he built his legal defense in large part on his contention that the sexual encounter between them did not happen. He didn't have to do it that way, but he did. It was not necessarily the strongest legal approach to a defense in this case, as evidenced by the fact that he was convicted unanimously on all counts. But that is what he did. And that insistence by him that she is lying, that insistence by him that the sex between them never happened, it has had very practical consequences for all of us. Because his denial, his claim that this never happened, his insistence that that denial be made in court by his lawyers on his behalf, it meant that the jury in his criminal case was asked to assess, well, okay, which of these accounts is credible? His claim that it never happened, or her testimony that it certainly did happen, right? It can't be both. So the jury was invited to assess in open court which one of these accounts is right. And that's the legal fact of it. The human fact of it for all of us is that we, the public, got all of these details of the sexual encounter between them, not because any one of us was desperate to know, but because it was a crucial question at his criminal trial. Is she recounting this event in a way the jury finds credible? Because that was the test. Her credibility, the details she had to remember, became very legally relevant. So, high ick factor, definitely. High importance, though, too, in terms of the first ever felony conviction of a U.S. president in American history. So there is his somewhat bizarre legal approach here, right? Which he has continued since the trial, even at last week's presidential debate, his denial that this encounter happened, right? There are the legal consequences of that for him. There are the things we can't ever forget, consequences for us as the American public because of all the details we had to learn as a consequence of that being his legal strategy. But there's also Stormy Daniels herself, a real live person. And the human fact of all of this for her is that Donald Trump, former president of the United States, really did try. He really did decide that he would try to stave off these 34 felony convictions by attacking her as a liar. He did not have to do that in order to defend himself against these charges. In fact, it wasn't even a good legal strategy. But that's what he did. And his attacks on her in those terms have led to years of ever-increasing threats against her. So we will talk about that tonight, including what that has meant for this one life that she has on Earth and for her family's life and safety. We will talk about what it means for all of us citizens whose country's history has been profoundly shaped now by this one woman insisting that she should tell what she knows, regardless of the threats, regardless of the targeting, and damn the consequences. With that, here is Stormy Daniels. Stormy, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
You do not have to do this. I was very surprised that you agreed to do it, but I've been really looking forward to talking to you for a long time. I guess I mostly just want to know how the last few weeks have been. This has been a many-year saga for you, but this is a qualitatively different time. Since the conviction, it's been a few weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a lot. It's been intense. And I think that part of that comes from my mistake of, in my mind, thinking that this would be an ending, that this would be the light at the end of the tunnel. This was the what I was working towards, that it would be like a movie when the judge hits the gavel, the credits roll, and it would be tied up in a nice little gift bow and it would be done. But that's not how real life works. Mm-hmm. And my friends were, celebrating and sending me messages and texts, not just friends, like everybody, people who were happy that, the verdict came down and it was over. But meanwhile, I knew that for me, it was just getting started, because for every person that was excited and thrilled and congratulating me, there was somebody else that was very upset.
Yeah.
And it just poured gasoline on some of that stuff that I had been going through the entire time. It's kind of common knowledge now that a lot of the people were doxxed. I know that Cohen was doxxed. They're trying to dox jurors. The judges were doxxed. I was doxxed. And I know that it's directly related because it happened while I was literally still on the stand.
What's the consequence for you of having your address out there?
My mailbox was destroyed. My animals have been injured. My daughter can't go outside. There's press and looky-loos out there. I'm afraid to go outside. I'm afraid to go out and mow the lawn. I can't go anywhere. I'm afraid of being followed. Yeah. The death threats are so much more graphic and detailed and brazen. Like, people don't care. And it's scary, and leading up to the trial was hard enough, like flying up here repeatedly and sitting in the rooms and going through things and reliving all these terrifying moments. The only thing that kept me going, I guess, was thinking that there was an end in sight.
Yeah.
And there's not.
Is there any sense of, vindication? This obviously, Trump being convicted, this is not a case that you brought. This is a case that prosecutors brought. You were brought here as a witness to testify for it. You were subpoenaed to testify. You had no choice about it.
No.
Again, not your case. That said, the way the case was presented to the jury, the prosecutor described to the jury in his closing argument, Stormy Daniels is the motive, saying how crucial your testimony was. Your testimony was not only riveting, it was absolutely integral to the case. Does the verdict sort of feel like a vindication to you, at least in the sense that the story is straight now, that the jury has agreed that he was wrong when he called you a liar?
Yes, but no. I don't understand. Life is not fair. And I am getting constantly attacked. It was called the Stormy Daniels hush money trial, and that's not what it was. It was about falsification of business records. And I was just one thing, but I was the most exciting part, and I was the one that took the stand. I was the one that I think testimony made such an impact. There were so many other people they could have called. They didn't call Karen McDougal. So it was vindicated. When he was found guilty, for that brief moment, it was worth me testifying, because at first I wasn't going to, and I had to shut down my life. I was basically, by choice, sequestered. I didn't work. I didn't tweet. If you know me, that's a big deal. I didn't tweet because I didn't want anything to be misconstrued or entered into evidence and create more work for the prosecution, or get the case thrown out, or disallow me from testifying. Right. Did I want to testify? No. Do you know how scary that is? Especially once I got up. If I had known beforehand how nasty Susan Neckles was going to be to me, I might not have. But I also knew that if I didn't testify, that it would look like they didn't want me to, and that I was not to be trusted. Right. That there was a reason that they didn't want me to testify. So I knew that I had to, and that it was important. And as soon as he was found guilty, that I knew that I had done the right thing in one aspect. The other side of that is, like you said, I didn't bring these charges. I didn't ask for it. I was subpoenaed. So much of the hate mail that I get is drop the charges. I'm like, I didn't sue him. I'm getting nothing. It cost me so much to come up here and testify. I was not paid. I'm a registered Republican. Sorry.
She's fine.
Rachel's like, get out.
When you say you paid to come up here, you paid your own expenses to come testify?
Of course, multiple times. I wasn't like compensated or written a check or anything like that. I got nothing. And this has cost me so much money. I wasn't paid by anybody. My testimony that I was subpoenaed, that everybody considers me to have done this great duty and be a hero, which I am not. I just told the truth. I was just a human being. I didn't do anything heroic. I didn't go into a burning building. I didn't, I just said the truth. And I've never changed my story, despite what other people said. Go back, look at interviews online from 2019, 2020, 21. My story hasn't changed at all. It's the only one that has been consistent.
Let me ask you about that. What you're saying was very much what the prosecutor said in the closing argument. And I want to ask you about the way that the prosecution, for lack of a better word, used you, the way that you fit into their case, because I want to hear from you whether or not you agree with that. I want to sort of give you your voice to say about it. He said, the defense has gone to great lengths to discredit Stormy Daniels on her account of her sexual involvement with Mr. Trump. They shamed her. They have tried to suggest that her story has changed over the years. It has not, at least not in any way that's significant. To be sure, there were parts of her testimony that were cringeworthy, but that whole episode in the suite at Harrah's, that was uncomfortable. Some of the details about what the suite looked like, the contents of his toiletry bag, the topics of conversation, those are the kind of details I submit to you that kind of ring true. They're the kind of details you would expect someone to remember. If she didn't testify about those details, it would undoubtedly give the defense more ammunition in their efforts to call her a liar, to argue that she was never in that hotel room. Now, in his opening and in his closing, Trump's lawyer, Mr. Blanche, told you that Ms. Daniels' testimony doesn't matter. That's a bridge too far, because it's certainly true that we don't have to prove that sex actually took place. That's not an element of the crimes charged. But the defendant, Trump, knew what happened in that hotel room. And to the extent that you credit Stormy Daniels' testimony, that only reinforces his incentive to buy her silence. The defense knows that, because if her testimony were so irrelevant, why did they work so hard to discredit her? What I'm saying is that her story is messy. It makes some people uncomfortable to hear. It probably made some of you, meaning the jury, uncomfortable to hear. But that's kind of the point. That's the display the defendant didn't want the American voter to see. In the simplest terms, Stormy Daniels is the motive. That is why your testimony was not just an amazing display, but also American history, the way that fits into this. Do you agree with the way they characterized you in this case?
The prosecution?
Yeah, the way that he's saying your testimony functioned and why it was relevant to this crime.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Why would I make some of that stuff up? And, yeah, I am. And I'm comfortable with it. And for those people out there who were like, oh, they let her get up there and say whatever she wanted. And I was, keep in mind, I did nothing but answer the questions. I didn't go up there and present an essay to a spoken word theater, I answered questions. And if you don't want to hear the answer, don't ask me the questions. And for those people who said that it was uncomfortable to witness or to hear, I lived it. All you had to do was hear my very PG rated version on the stand. I had to relive it. I had to say it in court in front of all these people, knowing that it would be public record, that my daughter is going to read this, that everybody's going to read this. And preparing for the case, remember, I had to go back and think about all these details and make sure that I had everything absolutely accurate. And it is important because it proves that I was telling the truth. And maybe this is too far for our conversation right now, but for all those people who like to drag me about talking about what his genitals look like, don't you think for a second that I wish there was something else I could prove? I wish he had a birthmark that looked like the state of Texas on his shoulder, or a funny looking mole. That's the only thing that proves that he did take his clothes off in front of me.
Yeah.
And you know as well as I do that if he hadn't, that I was lying, he'd have whipped his junk out a long time ago and proved that I was a liar. And it's the only thing I have. And he knows I'm telling the truth, which is why he wanted to shut me up.
As soon as you were done testifying about what actually happened in the hotel suite, Trump's defense lawyers moved for a mistrial. And they said what you had testified and the detail with which you had testified about it was going to be prejudicial to the jury. It wasn't related to the crimes that were charged, and the jury hearing that was going to make them have so much improper prejudice toward Trump that the whole trial had to be thrown out. And the judge said no to the mistrial, and the judge said, listen, you shouldn't have said right at the outset in your opening statement that the sexual encounter never happened. That set this case up so that the jury has to assess the credibility of Stormy versus the defendant.
Yeah, they put me on the spot.
And so they did that. But the detail of that testimony will be the basis of Trump's appeal. He will appeal the decision to have not called a mistrial then. That's going to be the way that he tries to get out of this conviction. Can we go over that test? Would you be willing to go through that testimony with me right now? There's no cameras in the court. Nobody's seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, I printed out that section of the transcript. Is this weird? Do you mind doing this?
I've done a lot weirder, trust me.
I walked right into that one. When we come back, Stormy Daniels gives her testimony here and explains what she meant by it. There were no cameras in the courtroom for this testimony or this trial, but we have cameras here now, so we'll have that next. I should also mention that when Ms. Daniels told me that while she was on the stand, she was doxxed, details about her home were exposed, she's right. Late in the afternoon of the first day she testified, the New York Post tabloid newspaper did publish an article showing pictures of her home in Florida. Separately, I should also tell you that we have confirmed today that in court that day, her first day of testimony, Trump's defense counsel did seek to enter into evidence a document with her full home address listed on it, unredacted. Ms. Daniels alerted the judge, which is actually reflected in the transcript. The transcript says, an exhibit is shown on the witnesses and the parties' screens. Trump defense lawyer, I offer this in evidence. Prosecutor, objection. The judge, sustained. Then the witness, meaning Stormy Daniels, it says in the transcript, whispering to the court, meaning whispering to the judge, quote, this has my address. Trump defense lawyer, well, let me ask you, you only partially filled this form out, right? Prosecutor, objection. The judge, sustained. Trump defense lawyer, can I approach? The witness, again, Stormy Daniels, whispering to the judge, quote, that's got my address. Whereupon the following proceedings were held at sidebar, meaning nobody in the court could hear this happening, but we have the transcript of it now. At that sidebar, the judge says to the lawyers, she, meaning Stormy, she turned to me. She looked very fearful, and she said, that's got my address. You asked to approach, and she said, that's got my address. She is very much afraid of this form, meaning afraid of this form being shown with her unredacted address on it. That form was not admitted into evidence. It was not, therefore, shown to the jury, but it was shown on what they call the screen for the witnesses and the parties, which means it was displayed on a screen visible to Stormy Daniels herself, visible to the lawyers on both sides, and visible to the defendant. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that we checked. She is telling the truth about what happened to her on the stand. More to come, much more. I'll be right back.
Saturday, September 7th, it's MSNBC Live Democracy 2024, our premier live audience event with your favorite MSNBC hosts. Visit msnbc.com/democracy2024 to buy your tickets.
I'm Christina Cauterucci, and this season on Slow Burn,
it's called Proposition 6.
The Briggs Initiative.
John Briggs is going to fire every gay and lesbian school teacher in California.
with so much at stake, young people became activists.
We can't let this happen in California.
And activists became leaders.
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
Slow Burn, Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. Out now, wherever you listen.
Can we go over that test? Would you be willing to go through that testimony with me right now? There's no cameras in the court. Nobody's seen it.
Yeah.
I mean, I printed out that section of the transcript. Is this weird? Do you mind doing this?
I've done a lot weirder, trust me.
I walked right into that one. Okay. All right. So I'm going to be...
I have to put my glasses on now.
That's fine. That's fine. Stormy Daniels' testimony in the criminal trial of former President Donald Trump was as consequential to the case as it was just show-stopping for everybody who heard about it. We're going to recount that testimony here now. And I'm interrupting right now and not just jumping into it straight away, mostly because I need to warn you that some of this conversation is about to be graphic. In these next couple of segments in particular, the conversation will not be appropriate for all audiences. So if you are squeamish, or if you're watching with kids, or if you, for any reason, just don't want to hear descriptions of unwanted sexual contact, this is your cue to check out and come back and join us in a few minutes. But with that said, here we go. Stormy Daniels, with her own testimony and me very awkwardly playing the part of Susan Hoffinger, the prosecutor who questioned Ms. Daniels on direct examination. Here we go. This is on your direct examination.
Okay.
Because at the end of this is when they ask for the mistrial. Okay. So I'll be the prosecutor and you be you.
You're good, Susan.
Thank you very much. What happened when you left the bathroom?
When I came out of the bathroom, I expected to exit, go around the bed and back out to where we had been sitting and talking and hopefully say, okay, time to go. I've been here long enough. That was actually when I realized how long I had been there. And when I opened the bathroom door to come out, Mr. Trump had come into the bedroom and was on the bed, basically between myself and the exit.
What was he wearing at the time?
His boxer shorts and a t-shirt.
What was your reaction to seeing him like that?
At first, I was just startled, like a jump scare. I wasn't expecting someone to be there, especially mine has a lot of clothing. And that's when I had moments where I felt... That's when I had that moment where I felt the room spin in slow motion. I felt the blood basically leave my hands and feet, and almost like if you stand up too fast and everything kind of spins. That happened too. Then I just thought, oh God, what did I misread to get here? Because the intention was pretty clear. Somebody stripped down to their underwear and posing on the bed, like waiting for you.
I'm just going to stop for a second. When you say the blood left your hands and feet, like you stand up too fast, everything spinned, you mean that you were shocked?
Yes.
You were just surprised that he had come into the bedroom and had taken off his clothes?
Yeah, even if he had his clothes on, I still would have been startled.
Yeah.
Then when I realized that, he was minus a lot of clothing, then I was just like, oh no, what's happening?
So the prosecutor continues. What happened when you came out of the bathroom? Did he stay on the bed?
When I exited, he was just up on the bed like this. And then I did a pose, and I won't because I'm not wearing pants. Where I say I have made the joke. Sometimes he was doing his best Burt Reynolds.
Oh, he kind of extended himself on the bed like to show you the length of his body?
Uh-huh.
Was he joking?
I don't think so. I wish that would have actually made it better.
Was there a bearskin rug? There was not. Okay. Returning to the transcript. What happened after that?
When I went to step around, I laughed nervously and, tried to make a joke of it and step around and leave. Even though I was moving like I was in a fun house, I felt like I was in slow motion. I thought to myself, great. I put myself in this bad situation. Like, what did I do? How did I misread everything? He stood up between me and the door, not in a threatening manner. He didn't come at me. He didn't rush at me. He didn't put his hands on me, nothing like that. I said, I have to go. I gotta go. He said, I thought we were getting somewhere. We were talking, and I thought you were serious about what you wanted. If you ever want to get out of that trailer park, basically, I was offended because I never lived in a trailer park.
Now, at this point in the testimony, there are objections and there's a sidebar with the judge. You volunteer here. He was not physically coercing me.
No.
Are you at that point trying to establish that you didn't want to do it, but he wasn't making you do it?
He wasn't. I didn't want to ever say that it was any sort of rape or that he used a weapon or physical violence or force.
Yeah.
Also, I could have taken him.
But you said, I put myself in this bad situation. What is the badness of the situation?
I had an ex who was also worked at a PR firm he had these little pearls of wisdom. For instance, one of them, he's like, the press will always use the picture of you looking the worst, not the one of you looking the best. Yeah. Those sorts of things. Put yourself in a bad situation and bad things happen. Put yourself in a bad situation. He used to say that to me all the time. Yeah. Don't get in a car with your friends who've been drinking. Then it's your fault. Something happened. Put yourself in a bad situation, bad things happen. I had put myself in a bad situation. But how did I misread it?
Yeah.
If your friend is wasted, falling down drunk, and you get in the car, you know they're drunk. I was like, what cue did I miss that told me to expect when I came out of that bathroom that he was there?
After the sidebar, the prosecutor says, you were both standing up at this time?
Yes.
And what happened next, briefly?
I think I just blacked it out. Now here is something I want to say.
Yeah.
I think that they have a typo here.
Okay.
I didn't say blacked out. They've taken that and run with it. If you go back and look at my older interviews where I have the exact same thing, blocked it out.
Blocked it out. So you think that what you actually said was, I just think I blocked it out?
Yes. Because blacked out means I fainted and I never lost consciousness. I think I just, blocked it out.
Well, your next line in the transcript is, I was not drugged.
Yeah, but people have taken this and run with it. Oh, you blacked out? You woke up on the bed?
Right.
No, it blocked it out. Go back and look at old interviews. It's the same. I know I have an accent, but I think I just blocked it out. I was not drugged. I never insinuated that I was on drugs. I was not drunk. And I never said anything of that sort. I just don't remember. And
what you mean, then again, there's some objections there that happened between the lawyers and the judge. But what they're discussing there is whether you are implying that you had been drugged or that you, right. What you're really, it seems to me like what you're really trying to say is there's parts of the sexual encounter that I don't remember even now. Yeah. And that's because I blocked them out. I have to tell you, Rachel, and I did write about this in my book. When I was going and meeting with prosecutors over and over, and they were nice people, they tried to be gentle with me. They were asking me the questions over and over because I wanted to make sure that they were doing their job correctly. They were also probably trying to prepare me for how awful the defense was going to be for me, although no one could have prepared me for how awful that woman was to me and how much she slut-shamed me, or tried to. They asked me such horrific, specific questions like, did his tongue dart in and out of your mouth? And I don't even know if you can use some of this, so you can just cut it out. When he was touching your breast, did he flick or roll or pinch your nipples? What did his skin feel like? Can you describe it? Things that would prove, when he said he didn't use a condom, well, what did you do with the semen? Mm. And that made me remember things that I didn't remember until then. I remember being in the car going back and having to wipe it off my leg. This is the graphic stuff that is not in the testimony, right, that could have been. As I remembered more of that, it still it narrows down the window of what I remember and don't remember. There's still a tiny part that I don't. And if what I have blocked out, I have now started to remember is so terrible, what am I still not remembering? Yeah. Why do you think you have blocked some of it out? Everything I just said, and I just felt your brain essentially protecting you from the memory. Yeah, and I thought that there was something wrong with me, or that I didn't say this stuff because I thought people would say that I was lying or making up. Well, you'd remember if something that impactful happened to you. That was then, and as I've gotten older and I've met people that have gone through similar things, or I've talked to therapists about this, they're like, no, that's a defense mechanism. Yeah. It is way more common for you not to remember these pieces than for you to remember it. And it made me feel a little bit better in a messed up way, or a little more normal. But I'm not a liar. Stormy Daniels is my guest this evening. I should tell you, we have reached out to the Trump campaign to ask for comment. They have not responded, but we'll have more with Ms. Daniels in just a moment. This is one of those things that I hadn't remembered or thought much of. It's not mentioned in my book.
MSNBC's Lawrence O'Donnell.
When I was working in the Senate, I didn't realize that it's the perfect training for the job that I have now, covering government, covering politics. The complexity of it all. Mastering the detail is crucial to being able to present anything that happens in Senate buildings or any of the other news centers that we have to focus on every day.
The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, weeknights at 10 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC. Rachel Maddow's award-winning podcast, Ultra, is back for a second season, and it's hit #1 on Apple Podcasts. Episodes drop for free on Mondays, but you can subscribe to MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts to get early access to every episode the Friday before it drops. And with MSNBC Premium, you can listen to all of Rachel Maddow's original podcasts, including Season 1 and Season 2 of Ultra, Deja News, and Bagman, ad-free. Subscribe to MSNBC Premium on Apple Podcasts.
We're back with more of my interview with Stormy Daniels. For this section of the interview, I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier in the hour, which is that this portion of our discussion may not be appropriate for all ages or for anyone who doesn't want to hear relatively raw discussion about unwanted sexual contact. It is not prurient. These details are directly relevant to establishing in front of the jury the relative credibility of Ms. Daniels in contrast to the credibility of Mr. Trump's denial that their sexual encounter took place. That said, if you do not want to know these details, this is your fair warning. All right, let's go. This testimony, obviously, the way the defense reacted to it was to say, this is so prejudicial to Trump, and it's not related to the crimes. The jury, now that the jury has heard this, we have to throw this whole trial out. The judge allowed it because you having this detailed recollection allows the jury to assess your credibility about whether or not this thing happened when Trump says it did not happen. Right. But for all of us out in the world watching you testify, those of us who are in the court, for everybody who read this transcript, a whole new thing emerged from this that we didn't know before, which was this kind of feels like he was offering you a part on The Apprentice and you did not want to sleep with them and you were pressured into it. And it wasn't that it was rape, but it was manipulative.
It was definitely manipulative. And I just have fought so long by saying this was not Me Too. It's not Me Too. And I still have never said that it was. I still haven't said that it was Me Too. I still haven't said that it was rape because I knew that would just open me up to that whole strippers can't be raped. Adult film actresses can't be raped, which is just one tiny step above. She was asking for it. She deserved it, which is what the defense tried to do on the stand. Yeah. Oh, you've seen so many men in their underwear. You can't really be shocked to see them. I mean, you're not expecting it, yeah.
So I'm reluctant to do this, but do you want to keep going with this transcript? Sure. Okay. Question. Mm-hmm. Can you briefly describe at some point, did you end up on the bed having sex?
Yes.
Can you very briefly describe where you had sex with him?
The next thing I know, I was on the bed, somehow on the opposite side of the bed from where we had been standing, which is sidebar, as they like to do. How did I get there? So there is still missing time.
So you came out of the
bathroom on one side.
Yeah. So
you would think I was here.
Yeah.
But I ended up on this side of the bed by the wall with the window.
The far side of the bed away from the bathroom.
Right.
And you don't know how.
No. So there's still a tiny, every day I wake up and think it's tonight, then, I don't remember. So when I go to bed tonight, it's tonight, then I am going to remember these pieces and how terrible is it? Or maybe it's not. I don't know. So I was on the bed, somehow on the opposite side of the bed from where we had been standing. I had my clothes and shoes off. I believe my bra, however, was still on, and we were in missionary position.
Then there are some objections, some discussion with the judge. Prosecutor resumes. Without describing the position, do you remember how you got your clothes off?
No.
Excuse me. Do you remember how your clothes got off? No. No. Is that a memory that has not come back to you? You don't at this point remember. Is that correct?
Correct.
And did you end up having sex with him on the bed?
Yes.
Do you have a recollection of feeling something unusual that you have a memory of? And I left this objection here in your notes just so you could see it, because at this point, Trump's lawyer objects and it is sustained, and the prosecutor moves on and does not follow up on that. But her question was, do you have a recollection of feeling something unusual that you have a memory of? Mm-hmm. Do you know what she was asking you about there?
About his skin.
His skin? What do you mean?
And this is one of those things that I hadn't remembered or thought much of. It's not mentioned in my book, but as they were questioning me, I was 20, I was in my mid-20s.
27, right. Yeah.
And I was an adult film actress, which means that the people that I was performing with were adult film actors. Ripped, young men close to my age who make their money off their bodies. I had never touched skin before that felt like that. And the word I think I used was like crepey, which now with the hell damage that comes with being older. And that just, it was so shocking to me that I remember in that moment that what it felt. Anyway, I think that's what she was asking because I don't think she would have been brazen enough to ask directly about his penis. It could be either or of those. I don't know because there was an objection.
The prosecutor resumes. What, if anything, do you remember anything other than the fact that you had sex on the bed?
I was staring at the ceiling. I don't know how I got there. I made note like I was trying to think about anything other than what was happening here.
And then she does explicitly ask, did you touch his skin?
Yes.
Was he?
I think she was trying to circle back.
She was circling back to that, and there were objections there. The next thing she asks, it's on the record in the transcript, is, was he wearing a condom?
No.
Was that concerning to you?
Yes.
Did you say anything about it?
No.
Why not?
Because I didn't say anything at all.
I know from rereading your testimony this morning that in the conversation that you had with Trump ahead of the sexual encounter, you had told him that you worked for Wicked. You worked for Wicked Entertainment specifically because they were the only condom mandatory company in the business.
I've been under contract with Wicked Pictures my entire career. And the only scenes you will see of me that there's not a condom is something that was shot for like my personal piracy, they're everywhere now. Like for my personal website or like, whatever. Every single movie that I ever made for Wicked Pictures, even if I was performing on screen with my real life partner, my husband, my daughter's father, we even had to use a condom.
And so the implication that I draw, reading those two parts of the transcript, knowing those two things about you, is that him not wearing a condom was of concern to you, and you not saying anything about it is upsetting to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if I had gone there with the intention of having sex or being an escort or being paid for sex, I would have brought my own condom, because I am allergic to latex. In every scene I've ever done on film or in my personal life, if I needed to use a condom, I've always had to provide my own because I have to use polyurethane. I've never relied on the male performer or the guy I was on a date with to bring their own condom because they usually bring latex. And that makes me feel like I'm on fire.
So him not using one and you not saying anything at this point is sort of emblematic, at least in your telling, of the fact that you did neither intend nor expect for this to be sex with Trump.
Exactly, because I would have come prepared so that I would have been safe.
Yeah.
And I would not have felt like my genitals were on fire.
Prosecutor continues. Do you recall how it ended, the sex?
Yes.
Was it brief?
Yes.
Do you remember at some point getting dressed?
Yes.
And tell us what you recall about getting dressed.
Sitting on the end of the bed, noticing that it was completely dark outside now and that it was really hard to get my shoes on. My hands were shaking so hard. I had on they were strappy gold heels with tiny little buckles. My hands were shaking so hard I was having a hard time getting dressed. And he said, "Oh, great, let's get together again, honey bunch. We were great together. I just wanted to leave."
Did you say no at any time during sex with him?
No.
Why not?
Because I didn't say anything at all.
My conversation with Stormy Daniels continues right after this.
You're ruining one of my stand-up jokes, Rachel.
Oh, no. We've got more to come of my interview with Stormy Daniels, including some of the funny parts. I mentioned earlier that we had checked Ms. Daniels' assertions about her unredacted address being listed in court documents while she was on the stand testifying in Trump's criminal trial. That did happen, and it was shown to the lawyers for both sides as well as to the defendant. Prosecutors objected to it being admitted into evidence and thereby shown much more widely. Ms. Daniels was also correct that a conservative tabloid newspaper, the New York Post, published an article that included the name of the town where she lives and photos of her home while she was in the middle of her testimony on the afternoon between the first and second days in which she was on the stand. I also want to tell you that she mentioned another instance of something similar.
A DHL driver posted my address online because somebody sent something to my house. They still have not taken it down. I can't believe DHL is allowing this. So for those of you out there who might use DHL as your courier, like, don't do that, because they don't care if their employees put your address on the internet.
We looked into this one as well. Ms. Daniels is right again. We were able to confirm that a courier for DHL who was contracted to deliver a package to Ms. Daniels' home posted a photo of the handheld electronic device the couriers used, showing Ms. Daniels' name, showing the town where the delivery was made. We asked DHL for comment about that. They did confirm that it had happened. They told us, quote, DHL Express confirms that a courier employed by a service provider posted a customer's name and partial address on social media after completing a delivery in June. This regrettable violation of privacy does not represent our operating standards. At DHL, we require all service providers handling data to maintain confidentiality. The photo showing the partial address has been removed, and the courier is no longer assigned to DHL shipments. The photo was removed, but only because and only once we asked about it in order to fact check this interview. It is a hallmark of this time in Republican politics that anybody who has stood up in some capacity that has put them at odds with Donald Trump, anyone, soon finds themselves targeted and threatened by the Trump movement. The harassment and the threats follow like clockwork when he singles out his targets for disparagement at his rallies and in interviews and online. And for some of the people who get targeted, like members of Congress or judges or FBI officials or members of the military, all of whom he has singled out for attack, for people who are members of robust institutions like that, the threats and the targeting that come from opposing Donald Trump, those threats and that targeting, it's still terrorizing, it's still scary and dangerous, but maybe a little bit less so because folks in those kinds of jobs can get help, right? Members of the January 6th committee in Congress, they got additional security from Congress. U.S. Marshals had to step up security around judges. We've even had members of the military move to different U.S. military housing for their own safety, for protection from the kinds of forces that the Trump movement unleashes. But for individual flesh and blood humans who aren't part of some big, robust institution, who are just people, private citizens, who nevertheless somehow get crosswise with Trump and his movement, where's their help? There's no security detail to call for. There's no sergeant at arms looking after their safety. There's no one on the other side of any panic button. That is true for the jurors in these cases. It's true for the election workers who they've been harassing and threatening. It is true for our guest tonight. And that should mean something to all of us, because part of rejecting violence and intimidation as part of our political system is protecting the individual people who are being subject to it. And that is not happening yet in our country, which is a problem. More of my interview with Stormy Daniels is still ahead. Stay with us. Thank you for being here for this special edition of the Rachel Maddow Show tonight. The Republican nominee for president was expected to be sentenced next week. It's now been delayed until September. But that is expected to be when now he'll be sentenced for his conviction on 34 felony counts. Those crimes pertain to his effort to prevent my guest this evening from speaking publicly about a sexual encounter she says she had with him shortly after the start of his current marriage. As you know, he was convicted of using his business, of creating false business records to try to disguise a $130,000 payment to my guest tonight so she would not speak publicly before the election about her alleged sexual encounter with him. In this part of my interview with Stormy Daniels, we're going to go through a little bit more of her testimony from the trial, but also her elaboration on that testimony, explaining what she meant. The criminal charges that were brought in this case were brought because of the means by which Trump, the candidate, tried to cover up and keep secret and disguise the fact that he had paid this woman to keep quiet about this story. Her elaboration here is important because what was it about this story that was so worth paying to keep quiet? That was worth the gymnastic, even Baroque efforts he went through to try to cover up that the payment was made. Here's Stormy Daniels. Did you notice afterwards a DVD on the side table?
Yes, it was a DVD I had given him earlier in the gift bag from the show. It was on the nightstand that I signed.
Can I just stop there for a second? This is a really stupid question, and I'm sorry. Why does an adult film company sponsor a hole at a golf tournament? Is it because it's funny because of the word hole?
You're ruining one of my stand-up jokes, Rachel.
Oh, no. I mean, here's me, total prude, unable to talk about this, that are saying, they've sponsored a hole. And I had to keep saying it over and over again. It almost killed me.
Yeah.
That's why it's funny?
I think it is. Now that you've ruined my comedy act, I can say it's basically like, so they brought myself and some of the other stars, they brought their own holes to the hole. So it's like bringing sand to the beach. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you. Here all week. Try the veal. So you had given him a DVD because Wicked had brought you and other people from the company to this golf tournament. Were there lots of other adult film companies at the tournament?
No. We were the only adult film company, but we were in the gift room and everybody got to sponsor a hole. See, I still can't even say it without laughing. It's kind of genius.
It's
really
inherently funny. It is very good.
It is. And then, so the DVD was in the gift bags, and they had brought like different DVDs, of the actresses. And that one in particular was a movie called 3 Wishes that I wrote, directed, and starred in. And he specifically wanted something that I had directed, which is why in my stupidity, I thought maybe he really is serious about having me on The Apprentice.
Because when you met him at the hole on the golf course, you sort of immediately started talking about the fact that you don't just star in films, you've also directed.
Right. So the owner of the company was introducing everybody that was, there.
Yeah.
This is my contract girl, such and such. This is my contract girl, such as this is our publicist, whatever. This is my contract star and director, Stormy Daniels. And he was like, oh, so you're the smart one, you also direct.
And that's the basis on which you had continuing conversation with him about directing and about your role in the business.
Yes.
And do you mean, is what you're saying about that, when you say, oh, stupid me, I thought that meant, by that, do you mean his expression of interest in you as a director and his asking you business-related questions about the industry meant that you thought that you were having a business discussion?
That it was legit. And why it wasn't a red flag to have a meeting. And everyone's like, oh, well, you went to a married guy's hotel room. What were you expecting? Well, first of all, there's two parts to that. One, nobody knew who Melania was back then. I didn't know he was married. I knew that he had famously been divorced from his wife before because everybody saw that scandal. Did anybody in 2006 know the word Melania Trump?
They had been married just the previous year.
But nobody knew. It wasn't a thing. I didn't know.
It was a famous thing, yeah.
I didn't know he was married until he told me. So there's that. Second, it wasn't a hotel room. When people think hotel room, they think of the hotel rooms that 99% of people have only stepped foot in, which is where you walk in and there's a bed and a dresser and it's a hotel room. This was a room that was bigger than my apartment. It had a dining room, a living room, 2 bedrooms. If you had told me that it was a hotel room and you didn't know it was a hotel room, I wouldn't think it was like an apartment. Mm-hmm. Those of us who conduct business at conventions or things like that, don't think twice about going to someone's suite that has a conference table in it and a table. People like to be like, oh, you knew what you were getting into. No, I've also gone to 100 other meetings in rooms exactly like that, but nothing bad happened.
Prosecutor says, this is almost the end. When you were leaving and you went to leave, what, if anything, did you do or say?
He said, we have to get together again soon. He went to kiss me goodbye, and I just left as fast as I could. That was it.
Did he say anything to you about talking again?
Yes. He said, we should get together again. We were fantastic together. I want to get you on the show. And that was it. He didn't give me anything. He didn't offer to pay me or anything or a cell phone number, nothing like that.
Did he ask you to keep your encounter with him confidential?
No.
Did he express any concern at that point about his wife finding out?
No.
Did you end up having dinner in his room that night?
No.
You said it was dark out when you left?
Yes.
And do you recall how you got back to your hotel?
It was a cab.
After that night, did you tell anybody else about what happened?
Yes.
Just give us a sense of the people that you told and what you told them.
I told very few people that we had actually had sex because I felt ashamed that I didn't stop it, that I didn't say no. A lot of people would just assume, they would make jokes out of it. I didn't think it was funny. I didn't want to hear about it or assume that I was a paid prostitute, which I wasn't. So I told very few people. I also didn't want it to get back to anybody that I was dating.
So the overall picture in terms of your real life, not just in terms of this case, is that this is a situation where you thought there might be a legit business reason to talk to this man who's more than twice your age, who you had no intention of sleeping with. Right. He turned it into a sexual encounter. You did not want it, and you did not feel good about it, and you were embarrassed about it when it was over.
Yeah.
Having to recount this in detail in order to rebut his characterization of you as a liar. Even though you've told this story in a lot of different venues and you've told this under oath, this is the testimony from the trial, it seems like it's still not an easy thing to talk about.
No. Because I have to do it over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and I think about how hard this must be for a rape victim, for somebody who was physically assault. At least they get to just say it once, hopefully in court, and to a prosecutor, and they don't get to read about it every day.
Yeah.
I just feel so terrible for those people. Now I understand why a lot of people never come forward.
When we come back, Stormy Daniels talks about why it is that this fight, this confrontation with Trump, means that she now is not making a living, and why an action by Trump's lawyers right now has, she believes, put her in imminent risk of losing her home and of possibly having an arrest warrant issued for her. That's next.
You could be the biggest Trump supporter, a woman voting for Trump, love him. Ask that woman, you going to vote for Trump? Yeah. Do you love Trump? Yeah. How do you feel about him having your young daughter's legal name, address, and identifying information?
When you say you paid to come up here, you paid your own expenses to come testify?
Of course, multiple times. I wasn't compensated or written a check or anything like that. I got nothing. And this has cost me so much money. I wasn't paid by anybody.
We're back to my interview with Stormy Daniels. I want to let you know that Ms. Daniels was not paid for this interview. We do not do that under any circumstances. We also came to learn over the course of preparing for this interview and reporting out the circumstances under which we were going to be discussing these matters with her. We came to learn that she is in fairly dire financial circumstances because of her confrontation with Trump, as evidenced by the fact that she recently asked a friend, a man named Dwayne Crawford, to open an emergency GoFundMe campaign to try to pay the attorney's fees that she has incurred. And as she tries to hold on to her house. For that part of it, I'm going to let Ms. Daniels here explain. So the case in which you just testified was a criminal case brought by prosecutors. You were subpoenaed to be there just as a witness. The reason that you owe Trump money is a separate matter. Right. Your former lawyer, Michael Avenatti, who is now in prison for defrauding you and other clients, yes, brought a defamation suit against Trump by you. That case was thrown out and Trump was awarded attorney's fees. Correct. And that totals, to make a long story short, it totals at about $600,000 that you need to pay Trump.
Correct. And I was never allowed to give testimony. They never saw my evidence. It was never ruled whether I was telling the truth or not. So for all those people that are out there saying you lost a defamation case because they found you to be a liar or untruthful, is not true. They never even looked at the case. Other side of that is Miss Carroll, E. Jean Carroll, was called the exact same things by Donald Trump. And not only did they accept her case and let her take the stand and let her have her day in court, they've given her millions. Right. Meanwhile, my attorney's fees have racked up to over $500,000.
Do you have any means of paying that?
No. And nor do I think I should. It's not fair.
In terms of what happens next, Judge Bershon just lifted the gag order. Mm-hmm. So he's still prohibited from attacking court staff and prosecutors and their families, but he is now free to attack jurors and witnesses, which means you. Right. When the gag order was in place, did you benefit from that at all? Are you worried about it being lifted?
No. I mean, he's going to say what he's going to say anyway. Yeah. I'm not afraid of what he could say about me or what he could call me. I'm telling the truth. I'm the only one that has continued to tell the truth. I can prove everything that I've ever said. So I'm not concerned about those things he might say.
Yeah.
I'm concerned of him saying something that will make his followers come after me more.
Has that changed over time, the character of the way people have come after you, the kind of language? How has it changed over time?
The biggest thing is that they're not hiding. They used to all be bots.
Oh.
Now they're using their real stuff. There's, Facebook threads from people in my own community planning to do things to my house and my family. I sent some messages over when Barrett was on another show, and they couldn't even air everything they said, graphic details about how they were going to rape everybody in my family, including my young daughter, before they killed them. Very graphic things talking about a child. But most importantly, Trump is trying to make an example out of me, of anybody who dare stand up to him. And I was served again day before yesterday. And they were trying to take my partner's house. It has nothing to do with me. He doesn't even own the house, technically. It's got a mortgage. The bank owns it. I don't own that house. I pay him rent every month because I split some bills with him, but I don't own it. My name's not on the title. I didn't put any money down on this house. They're trying to take his house. They're demanding personal information about my 13-year-old daughter. I refuse to fill out that form. They're
identifying information about her.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where she lives, her legal name, her date of birth. Why do you need that about a child? So I didn't fill out that part of the form. I left it blank, and they rejected it and sent it back and are demanding that I be held in contempt with sanctions, and that I have to pay this money. I have to pay $600,000 plus sanctions and be in contempt of court, which comes with a warrant possibly, because
an arrest warrant,
because the things I said, which they found him guilty of, I also have to pay. And I'm protecting my child. And you could be the biggest Trump supporter, a woman voting for Trump, love him. Ask that woman, you going to vote for Trump? Yeah. Do you love Trump? Yeah. How do you feel about him having your young daughter's legal name, address, and identifying information?
Yeah.
And no woman out there, I can imagine, would give that information up. They got my address, and look how quickly that happened. You think I'm going to give up the other address? Because sometimes she's with me, obviously, and sometimes she's with her father. Why would I do that?
But that's essentially, so there's basically two impasses now in terms of that money and that the resolution of that defamation case and you paying the legal fees. One is you don't have the money to pay, but two is they want you as part of that to give over that identifying information about your daughter, and you were refusing.
And even if I had the money, even if I had billions, it's not fair. Why do I have to pay it? And I'm so happy for E. Jean Carroll, but literally the same three sentences, liar, whack job, con job or whatever. She gets over 80 million and it costs me over 600,000. It's going to cost my partner his house. It's going to cost my daughter her privacy for the rest of her life. It's not fair.
I feel like, Stormy, the Trump movement has destroyed or tried to destroy a lot of people for posing a threat to Donald Trump or a challenge to him. And there are, as you've been describing, millions of Americans, if not tens of millions of Americans, who have a rooting interest in all of these various efforts to confront him and expose his behavior and hold him accountable for crimes or treachery or whatever. But the rooting interest doesn't help you, right? No. Well, more than half the country is rooting for him being held accountable. The people who are actually in the middle of these confrontations are being terrorized and menaced and ruined. And overall, this system, I'm sorry to sort of put this to you, but I feel like the system is unsustainable unless the real live human people who are willing to stand up and be counted and speak the truth against him are themselves protected.
Yeah. And you could be me.
Yes.
We could all be me. Anybody out there. They're trying to seize property of people that I care about that's not even mine to scare me. They're trying to ruin my daughter's life before she even has a chance to live it. And they're trying to financially ruin me and take money. Because I told the truth. And I shouldn't have to do that. And I've never asked for help before. I've been fighting this by myself. You know, even the people closest to me, my best friends, my, partners, everyone else can take a break. You know, my best friend Dwayne has been my tour manager, my assistant. He's lived it the most with me, but even he gets to take breaks. He gets to get on a plane and go home and take his kids and his family to Disneyland and not think about it. I am the only person that every single day for the last 6 years, this has bled into my life. Some days worse than others. Some days I'm picking pellets out of my horse's body and getting served papers and sobbing because they're trying to, because I miss my daughter. And she's not safe if she's with me sometimes. And some days it's just things I read on the internet. But every single day, even you, you live this, you tell the story. Even you, Rachel, like there has to be moments where you've gotten to check out, at least for a minute.
Yeah.
I've never had a day like that in over 6 years.
Your work life has been severely curtailed by this. Changed. You've still got some stuff going. You've been doing comedy events.
I just came back to that last week, but same thing. The owner of the club got death threats.
Really?
I'm from New Orleans, and it's New Orleans, so she didn't care. But like, how many places are out there that I don't know about that are afraid to book me?
How are you going to make enough money to live?
I'm not. Like, it's literally like between legal fees and not being able to work, especially because I wasn't working during, remember the trial got pushed.
Yeah.
So I had taken off a bunch of time before, and then it got extended. So there were several months where I didn't do anything. I just stopped doing my podcast because they were freaking out about everything I said. I didn't even get to tell the podcast company why I stopped talking to them, because I didn't want anything I used to be entered in, just create more work for the prosecution, basically. Or I didn't want to be taken off the witness list for all the reasons I told you earlier. There's so many things. People being just afraid to hire me. Luckily, I do have some really great people. I host the TV show on Out TV. And I'm starting to go back and do some stand-up comedy and things like that. But I've lost a lot more than I've made. Mostly my peace, mostly my daughter's privacy and time. Time I'll never get back with her.
Given that, are you worried about Trump potentially being elected to a second term?
Shouldn't we all be worried about that?
Are you worried about it particularly for you?
Yes.
Why?
Because I think that he will try to make even more of an example out of me. And also because his followers will probably be even more bold, thinking if they do something, he'll pardon them.
In terms of his own criminal liability, he's due to be sentenced very soon. You said shortly after the verdict that you thought he should be sentenced to jail and community service, working for the less fortunate, or, quote, being the volunteer punching bag at a women's shelter. Do you still feel that way? You still think that?
Yeah, money's no object to him. For somebody else, finding them a bunch of money could definitely teach them a lesson. In his case, his supporters just go throw it at him. And we're talking about a man who got convicted of 34, and they, in one night, how much was it? Like $100 million or something was given to him when he was found guilty. Wish I could be found guilty. It's finding him's not going to do any good.
Yeah.
I think, taking away his control which is freedom, by a jail sentence, if that's what fits it, would teach him the most, because he's so used to being in control.
Yeah.
It's not about locking him out and taking away his freedom, it's about taking away his control. Would be more helpful in this case, I think. And making him do some community service, especially with those people that he looks down upon so much.
On the issue that was just mentioned there of a potential arrest warrant for Ms. Daniels and the contempt of court review that's being sought by Trump's lawyers, we have confirmed that there is an August 7th court hearing on these matters. As you heard from her a few moments ago, Ms. Daniels says she is not able to pay the $600,000 that she has been ordered to pay. She is concerned about providing documents in the case that require her to reveal personal information about her daughter. Her lawyers have asked for a confidentiality agreement before she hands over that information. Trump's lawyer told the judge that Ms. Daniels should have to hand over the information now, and then afterwards she can ask the court for a confidentiality agreement. The court actually sided with Trump and his lawyers on that. On her GoFundMe page tonight, Ms. Daniels just posted this. Quote, "This information is not only a violation of a child's privacy, but has the potential of very real and immediate danger. In response to her own doxing and fearing for her daughter's safety, Stormy declined to provide those details unless a confidentiality agreement was granted. No mother should be forced to choose between protecting her innocent child and contempt." We have reached out to the counsel that's representing Mr. Trump in this matter. We've reached out to him for comments. We have not heard back. We will let you know what we do here if we do hear from him. But we'll be back with the conclusion of my exclusive interview with Stormy Daniels right after this. But you're worried that you would have
gone Stormy.
So in the middle of your testimony, but with you not in the room because there was a recess, the judge calls the lawyers up. And Judge Merchan says to Todd Blanche, Trump's defense lawyer, "I understand that your client is upset at this point, but he is cursing audibly and he is shaking his head visually, and that's contemptuous. It has the potential to intimidate the witness," which is you, "and the jury can see that. Mr. Blanche, I will talk to him." The judge, "So I'm speaking to you here at the bench because I don't want to embarrass him." Mr. Blanche, "I will talk to him." The judge, "You need to speak to him. I will not tolerate that." Mr. Blanche, "I will talk to him." The judge, "One time I noticed when Ms. Daniels was testifying about rolling up the magazine and presumably smacking your client, and after that point he shook his head and he looked down, and later I think he was looking at you, Mr. Blanche. Later when we were talking about The Apprentice, at that point he again uttered a vulgarity and looked at you this time. Please talk to him at the break." Todd Blanche, "Yes, I will." So that's about your testimony. It's about something that happened in the middle of your testimony, but you weren't there for that exchange. What the judge is describing there, did you see that? Did you notice it in the courtroom?
I tried not to look at him because I just wanted to stay on point.
Yeah.
Not because I was afraid. One, I was, and if I shouldn't admit this, I also, if I had noticed that if I had seen or heard him saying like she's lying, I don't know if I could have controlled myself.
What would you have done?
Who knows? I don't know if I shouldn't have had to be there. No person should have had to be there. And to have him in open court when we're trying to follow the rules and be respectful, he was still disrespecting me and still calling me a liar. I might have snapped and said something back, and that's what he wanted.
So you wouldn't have been intimidated, but but you're worried that you would have
gone Stormy. Because I am not the same naive young girl that was in that room.
What could the justice system and what could the people of this country have done better for you? What could have been done differently to give you more support so that this would not have caused the kind of ruination in your life that it has caused?
I should have been allowed to present my case like E. Jean Carroll was, my defamation case, because I would not be facing a $600,000 judgment right now because I would have won. I absolutely would have won. And I don't want millions. I don't need that. I need to not owe him, and I need to be able to have peace and be able to work. And now that they have doxed me because of this situation, I need a safe place for my family and my animals. And I don't know if I will ever have that because it just keeps happening.
Well, what you have experienced is something that is absolutely individual to you, but it is also part of a pattern of people who confront Trump or tell the truth about things about Trump that hurt him because they don't reflect on him well. People get destroyed. And there's something wrong with us as a country for not being able to protect you from that when you've done nothing wrong. And so I cannot apologize on behalf of the country. It's not my job.
No.
But I want you and your family's life to be better than it is. And I want you to have more protection than you have. And I hope you can get it.
Thank you. And I am prepared. This is my hill to die on. And I will probably potentially lose everything and maybe even be arrested because I'm not giving up my daughter's personal information. And if that means I am in contempt of court, I have done everything. I have shown up in court. I have told the truth. I have flown up here. I've met with prosecutors. I have honored the subpoena. I've done everything they have asked me to do, and they have not protected me. And this is the one thing. This is my line in the sand. This is my little girl.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Stormy. They have not protected me. And this is the one thing. This is my line in the sand. This is my little girl. You know, this interview surprised me in so many ways, but where I landed on with this in these conversations with Ms. Daniels is at this very simple place, which is that no one is superhuman, right? Our real life villains are not superhuman. We sometimes make them out to be. They're not. They're human beings with all the human frailties and human decency that every human being is born with. But our real life heroes aren't superhuman either. And, you know, Stormy Daniels is certainly, she is a symbol. She is a brand name. She's an indelible and consequential proper noun in American history, right? She's someone who will always be part of this crucible, this sort of trial by fire of the American principle that every American is subject to the rule of law. She is also a mom, right? She's also just a woman. And she has had 6 years of death threats and doxing. And she is facing losing her house and is facing potential arrest on contempt charges for not, after all of that, for not handing over personal identifying information about her 13-year-old daughter. We checked that assertion from Ms. Daniels as well. Looking at the court documents related to this case, she is facing contempt of court, the possible ruling that she's in contempt of court, which comes with it a possible arrest warrant. And she is facing it because she is not filling out a document that is demanding that she hand over identifying information about her daughter, including where her daughter can be found. Her daughter is 13. She says she won't do it. And so what will happen to her? And who's protecting her? She's not part of any institution that has any sort of institutional defense. She's just a citizen. And no one is superhuman, but you should not need to be superhuman in this country to tell the truth about a powerful person. I got more ahead. Stay with us. What I'm saying is that her story is messy. It makes some people uncomfortable to hear. It probably made some of you, meaning the jury, uncomfortable to hear. But that's kind of the point. That's the display the defendant didn't want the American voter to see. In the simplest terms, Stormy Daniels is the motive. That is why your testimony was not just an amazing display, but also American history, the way that fits into this. Do you agree with the way they characterized you in this case?
The prosecution?
Yeah, the way that he's saying your testimony functioned and why it was relevant to this crime.
Yes, absolutely.
Stormy Daniels is the motive, why the crimes were committed. As the prosecution said, her story is, in many instances, uncomfortable to hear. She describes it as uncomfortable to recount. But it is now indelibly etched into our American history. It is central to the first ever criminal conviction of an American president. Its details, the details recounted in court, and the further details recounted here in this interview tonight, they themselves are a somewhat searing insight into the personal behavior of an American president. But also, she's an indelible part of American history here because the targeting of her as a result of her testimony, her confrontation with him, the targeting of her, what has happened to her life because she is viewed by President Trump as one of his enemies because of this testimony, the story of what has happened to her because she has told the truth in this case, because she has testified in this case, is a harrowing story of the kind of menace, the kind of physical menace that the Trump movement uses against their perceived enemies. And that is one thing when it is directed at people who are in relatively safe positions of power with resources and with structures around them that can protect them from the worst. It's something else when it's just an atomized human out there in the world trying to cope alone. And the targeting of the people who are hurt by and menaced the most by the Trump movement is something we have not yet figured out how to defend against as a country. And it is not going to get better on its own. Joining us now is Michael Beschloss, NBC News presidential historian. Mr. Beschloss, Michael, it is really nice of you to be with us here tonight. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you. Thank you. What a poignant interview.
Well, let me just ask your reaction to this interview. This is the first U.S. interview that she's done after the trial. We thought the trial was done. Maybe it isn't now. But let me just, as a historian looking at this, what you think of it.
Well, she's a brave woman, and I don't want to tie her immediately to early American history, but I almost can't help but do it because the founders and the early Americans, we fought for our independence from England so that we'd have a system that was unlike England. No one could ever stand up to the king. You couldn't criticize the king without destroying your life. The whole idea of America was that this would be a society where we would benefit from everyone's criticism. So that the founders said the humblest person could stand up to a president of the United States or criticize him, say that he had done things wrong. He might not like it, but that person would not have their lives destroyed. And that's what's happened to Stormy Daniels. And obviously, something has fallen short, and it may be even worse now, given the ruling by the Supreme Court yesterday that's going to make the power imbalance between American presidents and our most modest citizens, that power imbalance is now probably tripled in the last 2 days.
I've been thinking about a lot about that ruling in light of this interview. It seems to me, and you study these things much more depth than I do. But I have always felt like the sort of I have always felt that sort of genius of the basic idea of the United States and our constitutional republic is that we recognize the rights of man, the naturally given rights of man. And we have set up a government that is to protect our rights, from each other, and particularly from a ruler, from a government that would infringe on our rights. And this Supreme Court ruling is about taking away our protections, taking away our rights to protect ourselves against a ruler who has just had his rights expanded so that he can do stuff to us with impunity, and we can no longer defend ourselves against it. And I think of it in terms of the Congress, and I think of it in terms of the judiciary, and I think of it in terms of all the institutions of our civic life. But I think about it, when I think about it as individual atomized humans, just flesh and blood people who don't have institutions around them, it feels like a complete inversion of the overall idea of American rights and the American ideal.
Yes, the Supreme Court is taking us backwards in that respect. You and I have talked a lot about Watergate, and one good result of the Watergate scandal and Nixon's departure and the reform laws that were passed by Congress later on, the idea was that we would never again have a situation that applied to too many presidents between 1930 and 1974, where they abused the IRS, they abused the FBI, they used the power of government to go after columnists that criticized them or people who got in their way. They would have, bank executives in the hometown of the person who had done this go after the person and take their mortgage away. It's what Stormy Daniels was reminding me of when she was telling about how much she has gone through. The point is that we should have a judicial system, a Supreme Court that protects the weak, not the strong. Instead, in the last 48 hours, the Supreme Court, through its non-wisdom, in my view, has decided to give even more power to the strongest person in the society, President of the United States, and also other strong people around that person. That's not the way it's supposed to be. It's not progress.
Yeah, and it is something that we need to compensate for as a country. If the courts are not going to do it, then we have to find other ways as a civic entity to protect the people among us who are in the most danger.
Because our government will trample on our liberties and do corrupt things, and no one will be able to stand up to it.
Yeah. Michael Beschloss, NBC News presidential historian, thank you for this perspective. Thank you for being here tonight. It's a pleasure to have you here, Michael.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you, Rachel.
After the Supreme Court's ruling on that immunity case this week, Trump and his counsel did move quickly to try to get his 34 felony convictions in New York thrown out. Trump was set to be sentenced for those convictions next week, but today the judge in the New York case announced that he'll delay sentencing until September. And I want to show you the letter that Judge Merchan wrote to the attorneys in this case announcing it. He said, quote, "The matter is adjourned to September 18th, 2024 at 10 a.m. for the imposition of sentence, quote, if such is still necessary." When he says, if such is still necessary, what he means is if the Supreme Court decision doesn't effectively wipe out that jury's unanimous guilty verdict against Trump on 34 felony counts. It's an open question. Joining us now is Catherine Christian, former assistant district attorney in the Manhattan DA's office. Ms. Christian, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time.
Glad to be here.
So let me first ask you, this interview with Stormy Daniels tonight, we set this interview in motion when we believed that Trump's New York trial in which she testified was over. Now, clearly, it's not. With the sentencing delay, with the judge entertaining a new motion to throw out the case, given what happened at the Supreme Court, I just have to ask you, is there anything about this interview, about Ms. Daniels talking publicly about her testimony, which could still have any bearing on the trial and the way it resolves?
No, I don't think so. So the proceedings aren't over because he hasn't been sentencing, but the trial is over. Her testimony is complete. She's a free agent. So there's nothing that she said. Basically, it tracked the transcript. She added additional detail, but nothing that really will harm the case.
If Judge Merchan does entertain this, he is going to entertain this motion from the defense to set aside the verdict. Would the New York District Attorney's Office then have the option of retrying the case and using a different selection of evidence to try to prove the same criminal charges, but without reference to official acts by Trump?
Well, assuming that Judge Merchan grants the motion to set aside the verdict, which he probably shouldn't, because I don't believe these are official acts, the tweets, the whole testimony. But assuming he did, then the case would have to be retried. And then the DA's office would obviously exclude those tweets, the whole Hicks testimony, if the judge would decide those are official acts, which I don't think he will. But if he did, they would have to retry it without that. The reality is, if you exclude that testimony, there is a mountain of evidence that points to guilt. So you wouldn't need that evidence. And that would be the argument, quite frankly, the DA is going to make in their response to this motion to set aside the verdict, that there was nothing prejudicial with those if they were deemed official acts, which they're not, but if they were deemed official acts, if you took them out, there's still a mountain of evidence.
And so the way that would work, and forgive my ignorance on this, not a lawyer, but if some of the evidence was determined or it was argued that some of that evidence was relevant to his official acts as president, you couldn't extricate that evidence and leave the jury's verdict intact. You would need to represent all of the evidence minus those things to a new jury and get a new verdict. You would have to go through from day one again.
I don't think so. I think Judge Merchan, if he were to determine that these were official acts, and I'll say again, I don't think they're official acts, but if he were to determine that, he could also determine, you know what, there was such a mountain of evidence. Even if you took these acts out, the jury would have still find guilt. Often cases are reversed on appeal because presidential evidence was in that was so prejudicial that it denied the defendant the right to a fair trial. So the Court of Appeals in New York reversed Harvey Weinstein's conviction on that basis. But often they will find that evidence was prejudicial, but it was harmless. It was harmless error. So there's no need to reverse the conviction, which could happen in this case.
Harmless error. We all have to learn. It's the Trump era in American politics. We all have to learn to be mini lawyers. We all have to learn all the jargon, all the language. We have to learn how all of these things works. That's you shouldn't have to learn this much criminal law to follow politics, but that's where we are. Catherine Christian, former attorney in the Manhattan DA's office. I really appreciate you being here tonight to help us put these pieces together. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, that's going to do it for me tonight for this special edition of the Rachel Maddow Show. I appreciate you having me here on a night I'm not usually here. I was really glad to have you with us.
A U.S. senator destroyed by blackmail.
He was not bound by the truth or by facts.
The country's most outrageous political demagogue, ascending toward the peak of American power.
Millions upon millions of devoted followers.
This is a story of heroes willing to face down tyranny and the risk to the country if they fail.
Rachel Maddow presents Ultra, Season 2 of the chart-topping original podcast. Listen now on Amazon Music.